start this with George Carlin, and I'm going to end it with George Carlin. I'm always relieved when someone is delivering a eulogy and I realize I'm listening to it. Here's some odd definitions. I don't know what dictionary these come from. Death. Adjective, terminally inconvenienced. Noun, to stop sinning suddenly. Life, 1. A sexually transmitted disease with 100% fatality rate. 2. For Christians, a test before they are allowed to proceed to hell. For Buddhists and Hindus, the time between deaths. 3. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. That's John Lennon. 4. Anything that dies when you stop on it. Dave Barry. The confusing 6, or some number, I don't know. I've got it. Okay, 5 and 5. The confusing period between the confusion of birth and the confusion of death. Radya. 6. Nothing but a competition to be the criminal rather than the victim. Bertrand Russell. Funeral. Noun. A pageant whereby we attest our respect for the dead by enriching the undertaker and strengthen our grief by an expenditure that deepens our groans and doubles our tears. Ambrose Bierce. Immortality. A toy which people cry for and on their knees apply for, dispute, contend, and lie for, and if allowed would be right proud eternally to die for. Ambrose Bierce. Woody Allen. I don't mind dying as long as I don't have to be there when it happens. Life is pleasant, death is peaceful, it's the transition that's troublesome. Phyllis Diller. Always be nice to your children because they are the ones who will choose your rest home. Morris. An 82-year-old man went to his doctor to get a physical. A few days later, the doctor saw Morris walking down the street with a gorgeous young woman on his arm. A couple days later, the doctor spoke to Morris and said, "You're really doing great, aren't you?" Morris replied, "Yes, doing what you said, Doc. Get a hot mama and be cheerful." The doctor said, "I didn't say that. I said, you've got a heart murmur. Be careful." You done with this? George Carlin, our last one. This is inspiration, not particularly funny. Well, I guess it could be. Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. Today's presentation, we have Loretta Downs, and she's going to be understanding the Death with Dignity movement. She's spoken here before, and it's been a wonderful, helpful presentation for us here Lakesiders as we step into the third act of our lives. And she's very interested in the social revolution to improve care and choices at the end of life. And she's going to make us laugh and cry, and we'll never look at dying quite the same again. She holds a master's degree in gerontology, is past president of the Chicago End-of-Life Care Coalition, is a certified end-of-life care practitioner, certified senior advisor, and she raises monarch butterflies in the summer. She just got a new house here. Hopefully she'll be doing that. Yeah. Okay, please welcome Loretta Downs. Oh my God, sit back down. I've done it again. I forgot the meditation. We have the most incredible meditation. Oh my God. I'm going to get fired from this job. You guys better join me while you can't. Thanks, David. Oh, David Warren is going to do our meditation this morning, and it's a real treat.
This morning for meditation, I'm going to play just a few selections of slow airs on an unusual instrument. It's called the shuttle bagpipes. It's played in a similar way to the Great Highland bagpipes, but not the same volume. I'm going to play a selection of slow airs on this instrument. It's
a set of shuttle bagpipes. Unlike the Great Highland bagpipes, it's not quite as voluminous and arguably a little bit more mellow. So I think you all know the routine. Take a nice deep breath. Get yourself comfortable in the chair. If you're feeling relaxed, perhaps shut your eyes and think of nice, clean streams in the Great Highland areas of Scotland.
And now Loretta Downs. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, David. That was beautiful. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Anybody here not alive today? No? Huh? Good. Like this. Great. And just what a blessing to be here once again. And this year, how many of you have heard me speak before? Oh, thanks, you came back. Okay. I do have a lot of new information because I've been a very vocal hospice advocate for the last 25 years. And I've discovered that we tend to use hospice as a last resort rather than a last reward, which it is. And I'm getting more interested in this huge movement that's going on now to change the way we're experiencing the end of our lives. Because, the world is very different now. How many of you have cell phones? We're communicating in amazing ways with people we love, except we're not communicating with the people we love about our dying. And it's causing us, as Dr. Ira Byock wrote in an article for the New York Times, dying shouldn't be this brutal.
And I know every one of us in this room has had experiences with a loved one or somebody we know or somebody a loved one knows that has had a very hard end-of-life experience. I'm not a medical professional, although I've been walking in healthcare for 30 years as a companion to people who are dying. And I'm not a legal person. I'm not giving you any advice. My mission is to create opportunities to talk about dying and death in positive terms, like this one, and like a workshop I'm doing in February. And there are posters on around the tree, as are handouts that are around the tree on this table and the table in the corner. My contact information is on here and references to everything I'm saying today. So if you want to get more information that I can't possibly give you in 35 minutes, grab a handout. Last year I stood here and I said 2 friends of mine will be dead by the end of the year. And I was right. My friend Gay, who was my mother's second mother since I was 14, died in February after I spoke here. And my friend Lynn, one of my best friends since we were 5 years old, died in December, and she would not talk about dying, which was really hard on me. And at the end of her life, she needed to be transferred to a hospice unit, and her family couldn't even tell her she was in hospice. She just could not get there. And some of us can't. I hope by the end of this talk that you're going to ask yourself some more questions about your own lives and what's meaningful in your lives. And where do you want to die? Who do you want to be there? What do you want it to look like? We may not have control over all the details, but the farther out we start thinking about it and asking these questions, the better the experience is. Because you may not want to believe it, but we're all going to do it. I have a little exercise I like. This is a time management course. Really, this would cost you $600 if you come. It's true, my friend Sydney Callett teaches it. Okay, draw a line on a piece of paper. Line. In fact, this is on the handout, so when you go home you can do it, because you can't do it now. And put a line on this end and this end. Pretty simple, straight line, shortest distance between 2 spaces. And birth and death, where are you today? Oh, right. I mean, this kind of reduces things to the simplest terms. Well, it took me 2 weeks after I took that $600 class to make a line. And now I'm pretty comfortable with it. I figure I'm 66, I'm shooting for 90, that would be fun. We'll talk more about this in a minute. So last year, I had 2 friends I knew who were dying, and I had 3 more I didn't know would die by the end of the year. Some of you know Rosemary Deneen? Yeah. I've really missed her this trip. And the first week I got here, I took a picture of the square with the Christmas decorations, and in my head I said, I've got to send this to Rosemary. And I really feel that she's here with us today. She'd be sitting in one of those seats in the second row, right? Yeah, and the question time would come, and whose cane was in the air first? Right. So that was unexpected. And a couple other people that were really important to me. So you never know. As much as I like to think I've got this much time, today could be the day. Which is what started this revolution in end-of-life care. The contemporary experience is pretty much one where 75% of us say we want to die at home, and 75% of us are dying in institutions. ICUs are factories for end-of-life because we're just not preparing for it. And the emotional and spiritual cost of this is tremendous. I didn't even talk about the financial cost, which we all know is pretty awful. And for those of us who have grandchildren, I think we have to think of some social responsibility and balancing. Why are we spending so much trying to prevent dying when it's happening already? Like Woody Allen said, I know it's going to happen, but I don't want to be there when it comes. That's like crazy. So, and our survivors have terrible trauma. I love the story about my Uncle Louis. I was 10 years old in 1959. I won't tell you how much I weigh, but I'll tell you how old I am. In 1959, and we went to visit. He and Andrea had just retired to Hot Springs, Arkansas. Anybody here from Arkansas? It was that's where people from Chicago were retiring before Ajijic got discovered. And he took us on a driving tour around town, and he said, well, here's the dry cleaners, and here's our grocery store, and here's where we're going to be laid out in the funeral home, and here's the cemetery where we're going to be buried. It was so normal. We don't do that anymore. I hear so many people say, oh, just cremate me and I don't care, bury me in the backyard, right? Anybody here have ever said that? Throw me in the trash can, bury me in the backyard. Yeah, well, that's not very helpful to your loved ones. Because they may try, if they really love you, this is what Mom wanted us to do. You know, so I love that story, and I want us to do that. I want us to integrate that. Because frankly, everyone here is closer than they've ever been to the end of their lives. Right? I'm 66. I'm into, as Kat said, that third stage. And I'm having fun. I mean, everyone in this room has already done something amazing, which is downsized. Right? What a healing that is, isn't it? Oh my gosh, I moved last year, which is why I was able to buy a house here this year. I sold my house, and I let go of so much. It took me months, and I wept and cried, and my hands shook as I held something that was a precious gift from somebody or a souvenir from a trip, and I said, oh my gosh, but can I really take this with me? No. And that's kind of how we need to look at our bodies, too. We can't take them with us. And some days when my back is acting up, would like to trade bodies with somebody else. So this revolution has started because we want to be autonomous. You know, this is the highest human desire, is to have autonomy, to live in a democracy, to be able to make choices for whatever we want, right? I mean, that's why we're here. You've all left your families behind, which is the reverse of what's been happening, right? The kids graduate from college, get jobs, and leave home. I mean, most of my friends have kids that live in other states. They're not close. And in our cases, the kids live in another country or countries. So the need for advanced care planning is growing considerably. And I know, how many of you have power of attorney documents signed for someone else? Okay, all right, leaders on the curve. Advanced care planning, which is now a big buzzword, the Medicare has just started to pay doctors to have these conversations because we've been paying our lawyers who have really no information about things like life support and do not resuscitate, or even the right person to recommend to be our power of attorney for health care. My sister would be the normal, person, my older sister, and when I asked her if she would be my power, she said, oh my God, Loretta, you're my baby sister. I don't want you to ever die. And I said, well, you can't be my power of attorney then, because that's what I need that person to be able to make a decision for me to have a good death if I can't make that decision myself. And it only kicks in when you can't speak. And about 90% of the people who get to an ICU aren't communicating. They cannot make decisions for themselves. And frankly, at the end of life, a lot of us become unable to make competent decisions for ourselves. So picking this person to speak for you is really important. And not only do I have documents in the United States, but I just completed one here, because I'm going to be here for 3 months. And it's a very small document. The notarios all do it. It's in English and Spanish. It has directions, and I've named 2 people in case one of them is at the beach when I'm in an accident. And they will take care of what I want them to take. And I've had the conversation. Again, we've got to talk about this. We have to be talking about how we want our lives to complete. The way we talk about, I'm going here next month, and I'm going here next year. We plan ahead. But we forget to plan ahead for the most important and most sacred part of our entire lives. That finale. It is so sacred. The most amazing things happen around someone who is living the end of their lives, and many of you have been there. The potential for reconciliation, the potential for forgiveness, the potential for finishing business that you've needed to finish a long time, that we need to be working on a little bit more in the space in between here and there. You can't change anything that happened here. We can't. We have to learn from it. We cannot go into this part of our lives carrying the burden of guilt. I wish I should have, could have, would have. Why did I do that? We can't. It makes this time we have left burdensome and not as free. And we have to be role models. You know, we didn't have any. This is the first time in the history of humanity we've had an entire generation of people living over 85. You know, the world used to look like this, with this giant young people base up to the very old. And that's changing. It's starting to look more like a rectangle. You know, in developed countries, the birth rate is down, and this is us at the top. You know, the fastest growing population is people over 85. And for people over 85, let's say everybody here was over 85, I could draw a line in the middle of this room and half of us would have dementia. There's a big wild card I'll talk about in a minute. Half of us. We need to lead the future generations who are also going to get to be in their 80s and 90s, because we've got all this great medicine, which has worked for us in so many ways. You know, the average 65-year-old takes 5 prescription drugs. That's average. And we're living longer because we have the advantage of these wonderful medical advances. Even my friend Rosemary had COPD, and she was on oxygen, and when she moved back home to Boulder, the elevation caused her some problems, and she was on it 24/7. She lived a lot longer with that. You know, now we've got portables and portable ventilators. We just have all kinds of wonderful medical advances, but they're also causing us really hard end of lives. So we have to learn to balance that. And the only way we're going to do it is if we start talking to each other about these things. So advanced care planning, the first thing you do, stage 1, when you're healthy, pick a person to speak for you when you can't speak for yourself. And then when you have a turning point in your health, review all of that. Go into more detail. Think about where you want to be, what doctors you want, what kind of treatments you want. And then the third stage is when you're truly facing the end of your life, when maybe you've only got a year to live, or you've got something that is going to cause you potentially to have an emergency situation, and get into more detail again. And there are forms for that. You know, something like, do you want resuscitation? What if you have a bad heart? Gee, what happens if I have a heart attack? Do I really want to go through that? Do I want to have CPR and pulmonary and ventilation and those things? This is a big personal decision, and it's something you need to talk about with your loved ones and with your doctor and with your faith community. It's a very important decision. There's some states that are they're not calling it do not resuscitate anymore. They're calling it A&H, A&D, allow natural death. Okay, how many of you have said to yourself, I hope I have the heart attack and die in bed? Come on. Right, yeah. Well, if somebody's there and they call 911, you don't get to stay dead. They're going to do these things. And it's a pretty brutal process. You know, for people who have comorbidities and are unhealthy, living in a nursing home, survival rate is 0. So, and it's a very violent kind of thing to have done to you. And there's really, ribs get broken, big drugs are shot into you. I like little drugs. I don't like the big drugs. How's that for a revolution? Marijuana. This country of Mexico wants to legalize marijuana. It's happening all over the states. You know, social revolution, cigarettes. How many of you used to smoke? Yeah, me too. 60% of us used to smoke. When they labeled cigarettes, it's 16% now. It made a difference. Seatbelts. Who would think of not, well, around here there are some people who would think about not wearing seatbelts because there's no one going to stop you. Yeah, condoms. I was at the lakefront in Chicago this summer, and there was a big festival going on. There were planes flying around, and one of them was carrying a flag that said Trojan condoms. You know, I mean, when I was 6 years old, I said the word pregnant in my kitchen, and my mother almost slapped me. You can't say that word. What? Yeah, the world is changing rapidly. What used to be bad is no longer bad. And you know, we used to die pretty gently and at home surrounded by loved ones, and we're not. And I can't reiterate this enough. We have to be the generation that changes this. And it's starting. Canada. What did Canada do last year? The Supreme Court of Canada said it is a human right to be able to choose the timing of your death if you have a terminal disease. Physician aid in dying is legal in the whole country of Canada. That is amazing. The United States has 5 states. California just passed it, and they voted on it 3 times before they passed it over the year. And physician aid in dying is, well, let's go back to end-of-life decisions. Right now, the first one is, let's say you have a terminal illness, and you know it, which is not always the case. Doctors sometimes are not very good at giving us the information, right? They're not educated. Truly, our doctors all over the world are not educated at end of life. Many of them have never even witnessed a death. Family practitioners not working in the hospital. If you're an ICU doctor or an emergency room doctor, you'll see a lot of death, but you're not supporting it. You're supporting medical treatment. So what happens? So you get something that's potentially terminal, okay? You have a choice to refuse treatment. Even in Mexico, you have a choice. If you're in treatment, let's say you're on dialysis, and you say, oh, this is just too burdensome, this doesn't feel good, I don't want to do this anymore, you can stop it. We have the right to withhold, withdraw, refuse any treatment, and so does your power of attorney for health care if you've given him or her the right instructions. That's the key. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you had to make a life and death decision for someone else? Yeah. Okay. How many of that was feeding tubes? Feeding tubes. Had to make a feeding tube decision. Yeah. All hard. People who have had to make that decision have said that it was the hardest thing they've ever done in their lives. Some of them had post-traumatic stress. Some of them felt that that was something they would never want to do again. It's a hard place to be in if you haven't been given instructions. And Glenn London said, dying is a spiritual practice with medical implications. It also has legal implications. Everywhere, even here, it has. And it's important that we do some documents. After choosing to stop treatment, then you can go into palliative care, which is now another big, everyone's talking palliative care now. Mexico in last year authorized part of their health system is that everyone would have access at home or in the hospital to palliative care, which is comfort measure, which is pain management. And, at the end of, a lot of diseases are painful at the end of life. It's not, well, we know, death is messy. It's a lot of things. And palliative care is really important, and now it's available to us. But there aren't enough palliative care practitioners. So when they legalize marijuana everywhere, we can do our own palliative care. I like massage, that's good palliative care. A hot bath is good palliative care. A really good Cabernet is good palliative care. Yeah. And then the next thing you can do legally is voluntarily stop eating and drinking, which is what Rosemary Deneen did at the end of her life. She felt, after thinking about this for 2 years, the last year she was here and the year in Boulder, and she decided that the things that gave her life meaning were no longer available to her. Her physical health had deteriorated to a place she'd had a couple emergency room trips because she couldn't breathe easily, and that was pretty scary and uncomfortable. She had 2 daughters living in Boulder and 2 in other places, and talked to them all, and they were all on board. She talked to her doctor and gotten some medication for comfort because she had a lot of symptoms that were pretty uncomfortable. And the day she decided to stop eating, hospice came to take care of her. And for 3 days, her daughters treated her like a queen. They were with her 24/7. They hired extra help to take care of the things that she would be uncomfortable with them doing for her. And I wrote her an email and said, how do you see your dying? And she said, I want to be surrounded by people that love me in my own house, and I want someone to be holding my hand. I think most of us would like someone to be holding our hand. And then there are the few of us who would like to be elsewhere, alone. You know? Rosemary did it 3 days. It took her 3 days. Unlike my friend Bessie, who was one of my hospice patients years ago, she was 97, had lived in a nursing home for 5 years, and I knew her before she became a hospice patient. And one day, about 6 months into hospice, I was sitting in a room and she was eating her dinner, and she put her fork down, having cleared her plate, and said, "Why is this taking so long? I'm tired of this." And I looked at her and I said, "You know, Bessie, it's going to take as long as it takes, and you're going to die. So what can I do for you while I'm here?" And we visited. And that went on for a while, and she kept eating. It was like amazing that she didn't make that connection. I wasn't going to say anything to her. And then she fell and broke her hip. Shipped to the emergency room, into the hospital, and the doctor said to her, "If we don't do surgery, you'll be flat on your back for the rest of your life." And she didn't want the surgery, but the doctor talked her brother into talking her into it. He said, "You know, she'll be sitting up tomorrow if she has this hip fixed." And I went there tomorrow after the surgery, and she had a plate of pureed food in front of her. And she said, "Loretta, I am tired of this." And she pushed the tray away from her and said, "I'm going to stop eating." And she did. "Take me home." We took her back to the nursing home and supported her in the chrysalis room, which is one of the projects I've been working on for a decade, to get nursing homes where most rooms are double, to provide a private space for families to keep vigil with loved ones at the end of life. This is something we need to do. Our hospitals need it. We need to provide this sacred space like we do birthing rooms now in hospitals. You know, we need to provide an environment in which transformation is supported and enhanced. And Bessie did. And for 13 days, I went every single day. I spent a few nights with her. I became very close. She didn't have children. Her husband had been dead for many years. She had a niece in a suburb who didn't have time to come in. And I hung out with her, and she talked. And I said, "Bessie, are you hungry?" She said, "Oh, the thought of food makes me nauseous." And I said, "Okay." She said, "But I'm a little thirsty." "Well, why don't you have a little something to drink?" "Oh, it'll make it take too long." I said, "Well, okay." She said, "Well, maybe a sip." And she did. She sipped water and ate ice chips for 13 days. In the morning she died. She was talking, and there was a group of nursing aid students coming through the nursing home that day. They were training, and I invited them to come in to see her. And I told them she was dying, and half of them wouldn't go in the room. They were afraid. They had never been in such a... And she looked fine. She was a little skinny, but she looked fine, and she was propped up in bed talking, and I left, and another volunteer and 2 of the residents came in and were keeping her company when she just closed her eyes and took her last breath. She got the death she wanted. And then there's Barbara, my friend Karen's mother, who also decided last year, and she was healthy. She didn't have anything. Bessie had some side effects from cancer treatment years ago that were causing her. She was truly terminal, but Barbara wasn't. She was 85 and just said pretty much, "And now I've done it all. I've done everything. My life's complete. I feel full. And I just don't want to be any more uncomfortable than I am right now. I want to be in my house. I want my daughters near me." And she called them up and she said, "I'm stopping eating today." I was like, "What, Mom?" in the morning. But she'd been talking about the end of her life for a long time. It wasn't surprising to them. They knew her. She had revealed herself to them. And they all got on board. They got hospice started. And the doctor authorized it because she was in end of life. And she ate ice chips and drank wine every night. And I saw pictures. At the beginning, it was a pretty good-sized glass of wine. And she was relatively healthy. You know, at 85, she had arthritis and some uncomfortable things, but so there was substance to her. And between the ice chips and the wine, she lived 33 days. And her daughters stayed. She was in her living room with a view out into her garden, friends came. She wanted to keep it kind of low-key. She didn't want to have service or, have a funeral before she was dead. I've had loved ones say when people start visiting that they feel they have to entertain the guests and it becomes burdensome. So the need to withdraw, the need for privacy and quiet becomes very tangible in those final days and weeks of our lives. And we need to remember that if we've been communicating with the people that we love, they don't feel left out. They understand. Plus, we don't know how to do that, right? When you hear somebody you love is dying, oh my gosh, she's in hospice, what do I do? Right? What do I do? We need to practice this more. It used to be death was always witnessed. When I was a child, everybody died at home, with family and the neighbor ladies taking care of them. That was the normal process. We all witnessed death. My mother told me a story. She was 7 years old. She was born in 1912, lived in a small coal mining town in southern Illinois. And the infant child in the neighbor next door had died. And they asked my mother to ride to the cemetery with them. And they put the casket on her lap. My mother was 7. It was a norm, and at the turn of the century, half of the children under the age of 12 died. Death was everywhere. At 1948 was the average life expectancy. It's 78 now. And I'm getting really close to that 70. So living well. Yeah, we need to embrace the miracle that happens at the end of our lives. One moment we are flesh and bone and brain and heart and all these things that are working, and in a breath, the way we were born with a breath and everything got animated, in a breath we de-animate and this body dissolves. Kat told you I raised monarch butterflies in the summer. I've been doing it for about 10 years. My biggest year was 300 I released. And believe me, that's a lot of cleaning out boxes. What anybody watch? Have any of you watched this? Is it fabulous? Talk about a miraculous. What a metaphor for us for transformation. I grew up Catholic, and there are a lot of scary ideas about death in Catholicism. In fact, a lot of religion. And now I'm Buddhist, and they've got even scarier ones. You go through these bardos with the deities that come and shake you up before they plunk you back into another life. Interesting, if you believe in reincarnation, that means you pick your parents. What a thought. Huh? Pick them. Anyhow, the caterpillar starts out, egg, caterpillar, eats, poops, lives. One day, about 10 days into its life, it stops eating, like everything does before it dies. We stop eating naturally. And then when it looks for a place to stage its transformation, and it'll hang under a leaf in the shape of a J for about a day and a half. It's like programmed. And in an instant, the skin behind its head splits and starts crawling up its body, and the caterpillar is actually dying in order to become a chrysalis. And when the skin gets to the top and the nose and the antenna, it falls off, and the chrysalis has been wiggling to get out of its caterpillar body, and then it sits still. And it's in this chrysalis stage of quiet that the miracle happens. And about 10 days later, a little door opens on the side of the chrysalis, and the butterfly emerges. It's got a big fat body and little wrinkled wings, and it starts to pump fluid into its wings and just feel this new form it's in. And in a couple of hours, it's dry, it wants to fly, and I raise them in boxes in my kitchen so I can have coffee in the morning and watch all this. And I'll take the butterfly out, and sometimes it'll sit on my finger, just getting used to being a butterfly, and then it flies up. And I have to think every time that happens that that's what death feels like. This freedom from a body, by the time at the end we're really ready to be done with it. And that we just kind of stretch our wings and fly. And I don't know where I go, where it goes. We're in Mexico for the winter. That would be, hey, talk about living that life. Yeah. Think about that. Think about the freedom that is allowed for us. You know, if we're not, you know, if we're want to choose our death, right now, legally, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is the only personal decision we can make. What's happening is there are a lot of people taking their lives violently and alone. And there's an increase in accidents, one-car accidents and drownings and, you know, in seniors. And they're noticing, we're starting their studies, they're looking at this, that a lot of people with terminal illness are taking their lives violently alone. And this is bringing another increase in the desire for physician aid in dying, where a person who's truly terminally dying, you're certified, it's a complex process. You know, in the States, we have Oregon, California, New Mexico, which is being challenged, the law's being challenged, Vermont, and Montana have right to die laws, and there are 26 more states now considering laws in their legislature. Canada has been Canada is really catapulting the whole world into seeing the importance of allowing people the autonomy of choosing when to die. Legally and comfortably, surrounded by your loved ones, so you don't have to do it alone. And then there's some illegal, you know, you can use the helium. There's a book called Final Exit. You can use illegal pills I wouldn't know how to get that. Well, I guess it's easy. There's the internet. Europe, you know, France just passed a law that's legalized terminal sedation. And there, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Switzerland you can go to from any country in the world. The Netherlands, Luxembourg, and there's one other country that allows euthanasia. Okay, but we can't take advantage unless you have $10,000 and an airline ticket to Switzerland. You can do that. Or Canada. After July, the laws are going to be put in place, and they'll have formulas for that. Okay, wild card. Wild card for all of us is dementia. As I said earlier, half of us over 85 are projected. Right now in the world, 55 million people have dementia. That is the entire population of Canada. It's a terrifying thing to think about, I know. I have been watching my cousin Andrea, whose parents had moved to Hot Springs, for the last 7 years. She's now at end-stage Alzheimer's, although her husband still does not believe she has Alzheimer's. He's praying for a miracle. He thinks she's going to get well. She normally weighs what I do, and I'm not telling you, but she now weighs 90, maybe 85 pounds. She's just dwindling. She's been nonverbal for 2 years. She's been bedbound for 2 years. She's in her 4th nursing home. 5 children. The stress on them has been tremendous because their parents made no preparations, refused to talk, and have no plan for their future. It cost $8,500 a month for her care, and now her husband is in the same nursing home. That's $17,000 a month for their care. Now Canada, you know, the government subsidizes nursing homes. But realistically, a lot of us are going to wind up needing that kind of care, you know, 24-hour care till the end of our lives. And it's something we've got to start thinking about. You know, I know that's why a lot of us are here. In Mexico, oh my gosh, end-of-life care in Mexico is compassionate, it's tender, there's something built in here, you know, they regard elders. Elders matter. In a lot of the world, we're considered to be a burden. You know, we're heavyweight. That's why we must be role models. We must be role models with our legacy. We must be role models. You know, the best legacy we can leave is a good death. Don't leave messes behind. How many of you have had to clean up messes from your parents when they died? Come on. Nobody? Wow. Yeah. Or somebody. You know, I'm going to wrap in a little bit and then we'll have time for questions. But this dementia is a wild card, and our loved ones are a wild card. I said, my sister said, I never want you to die. Nobody who loves you wants you to die. Nobody. They want you to live forever. And in some cases, they would give their lives for you to live longer. This is why it's so important that we're talking about where we're going at the end of our lives. We can't. Dementia is important. The Compassion and Choices organization, which is on the sheet, has a dementia rider that you put on your advance directives, which gives the choice when I can no longer feed myself and I am in an end-of-life condition, I don't want to be fed, or I do want to be fed. I don't want liquid given to me, or I do. So you're autonomous, you make your choice. If you choose to continue living, you have stated that, verified it, and the people who love you know that, and the people who care for you. You know, these caregivers live hard lives. The people who work in long-term care, they don't make a lot of money, and they do really hard work, and for many of them, it's a spiritual mission that they're doing. They are giving, the love that they're giving, they believe is going into the world in a wider way, and it is. I've seen acts of kindness and compassion in nursing homes that have stunned me. They were so gorgeous. We can't be afraid to need help at the end of our lives. Most of us will need help at the end of our lives. I certainly don't want to die fast in an accident. I would rather have time at the end of my life to see what I'm going to do. You know, we need to be considering the quality of our deaths along with the quality of our lives. It's going to change the world if we do that. The whole world. And it's a personal decision. But I heard somebody say the other day, you know, I'm not going to think about it. That doesn't help any of us. And studies have shown that when you don't think about it at all, the trouble is big at the end. I want to leave you with a quote from the poet Rumi. Life gives us two great gifts, love and death, and mostly they're passed on unopened. I encourage you, please open the gifts. And be well, live long, and be happy. Thank you very much. Oh, I have one more announcement. Yeah, I'm going to show you. The Cruz Roja provides these big bottles for the refrigerator. It's your emergency healthcare information. So if you have to call 911 here, there's a magnet that goes on your refrigerator. The emergency medical techs are trained to go look for the bottle, and it has everything you need. And they're having a training session on February 2nd at 2 p.m. at the Lakeside Presbyterian Church. You can go get contact through the website. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. We're going to take questions now. So for those of you who would like to ask, we'll go for as long as we can. Please raise your hand and a mic will be brought around to you. And if you would stand, and again, you've got to hold that mic really close.
Okay, and remember the LCS documents, including your uptake forms, are being passed out at the two tables on the exit, and I have handouts around the tables and a tree. Okay.
Is there any hospice care at Lakeside?
No, there is no official hospice, even really in Mexico. I'm going to explore one in Guadalajara next week, which is growing. But for the most part, Mexico has been giving palliative care. You know, ICUs exist in the major cities, but the push to prolong life with technology is minimal here. So the long-term care communities are all about palliative care. Your doctor, talk to your doctor. Develop a relationship with a doctor here. The ones that serve us are all very interested in how we want to live our lives through the end, and are very open to providing us with the kind of care we want.
One addition to that comment, Matzalan has a very proactive hospice organization.
Wonderful.
Fully licensed, integrated with a board of directors, government approved, and very active. Matzalan.
Okay. That's great. You know, a lot of things, Mexico is still a developing country, and a lot of things here are like the States and Canada were 40 or 50 years ago. But this push, you know, they're having the same statistical change with aging people living longer in Mexico, too. Anybody else?
I understand, of course, there's a lot of pain in dying. Is there problems as far as getting morphine from doctors when you're at the end of life?
There isn't always pain at the end of life. Like I said, Bessie was talking the day she died. She was having a good time. My mom was not in pain when she died, kind of slept through her death. But there are some pretty painful diseases that happen. And in this country, it's very difficult to get morphine. There are a lot of regulations about the distribution of it, but it is available, and there are other drugs. In the United States, morphine is very widely given. Yeah. I actually did a lot of research before this talk because so much of what I'm talking about is new, and that is the case here. Yes. No.
Do the documents that you sign to legalize your wishes here in Mexico require that they be notarized or whatever?
Yes, you need to go to a notario who certifies it, and you get a stamp, a very official stamp on the back that says it's registered then. Yeah.
For all the Canadians here, I'd just like to let you know that there is an organization called either Dying with Dignity or Death with Dignity, and it needs your financial and political support because the next 6 months are going to be quite crucial because we don't know exactly what the legislation is going to be like. So I urge you people to look on the internet, find this organization. You'll get a lot of interesting documents. It used to be considered a charity and tax deductible, but now the $50 is no longer tax deductible because they're doing a lot of political work.
Thank you. It's on my handout, as are some other resources that apply to Canada as well as the States. It's true. We need to be vocal about this. We just have to. We can't sit back. We're fine and healthy now, but that's not always going to be the case. And even if you don't feel that you would want to have that choice to allow a physician to give you a prescription, you can't deny it to somebody else. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, that physician aid in dying, it takes 5 weeks from the time you first ask for the prescription until you ultimately get it. And Oregon has kept very strong, a lot of documentation for the last 15 years. And about a little more than half of the people who get the prescription actually take it. And it costs between $1,500 and $3,000 for the drugs. And it's 100 capsules that someone else has to open and put in and make a little slushy about them, and then you yourself have to drink it. So it's not easy. And and most of the people that have done it have had cancer. Yes.
Yeah. Loretta, all your examples were about interacting with women. From your research and your experience, do you find there's an identifiable difference between the way men approach this issue versus how women approach it?
Absolutely. In fact, the majority of the people in Oregon who have taken advantage of the law have been men. And of the suicides, more men than women. In terms of advanced care planning, I haven't noticed any gender differences in how many people they look at age differences mostly. But those are two that I did come across, definitely. And, statistically, men are more proactive about things. They quit smoking faster than women do, and they actually kill themselves more successfully than women do. Yeah. Yes, next.
I stopped taking alcohol 20 years ago, but you mentioned a woman who died happily with a glass of wine in her hand, and I was wondering how alcohol would work for me as an alcoholic, especially since we're living in the province that produces tequila, and tequila was my favorite, tequila sunrises were my favorite drinks.
Well, I think in the list of medications available at the end of life, it seems to me that tequila should be on it. I mean, unfortunately, there are things like it might make you sick, but a little bit, just swab my lips with some tequila. But you can't tell this to somebody because they'll be afraid. They'll go, oh my gosh, he hasn't had a drink in 20 years, I can't give him tequila now. He said, well, in the States, I have a 5 wishes done, there's a lot, it asks a lot of questions about how you want to be cared for. And I wrote down, I want chocolate ice cream, not vanilla. I want socks on my feet because I live alone, nobody knows. I sleep with socks and earplugs and eye shades. I'm telling you too much. And I want classical music. I don't want a TV on anywhere near me. I want those pink lilies that smell so good. What else? Oh, I want my own clothes on. I was pretty fussy about how I want to be. So you can add anything you want.
I got it. So right here, please.
Hi. I'm an individual that doesn't believe in life after death of any kind, and I don't fear death at all. I just wonder about the people that believe in life after death. There are different varieties of these people. Which are the ones that are most against how what we're talking about death as we would choose?
Who are opposed to palliative care and hospice? Actually, yes. It's not so much about what people believe after death that is creating opposition to these laws. It's that people believe that life all life is valuable, whether it's disabled, dying, and that people should go through a natural process. Interestingly, we don't go through a natural process because in opposition to these laws and being pro-medical treatment, we are doing some very unnatural things. So Baskin & Robbins makes 131 flavors. This is a very deep spiritual issue, death. And the idea of killing people is horrendous, although war is okay with everybody, right? I don't get that. Capital punishment is okay. But to kill some 95-year-old by giving her pills or an injection that has been, man who's been suffering for 5 years, a lot of people find that to be immoral. So the discussion will continue, and it is important that we voice our choices.
This is our last question. And she's going to be at the Peacock Garden afterwards.
And
any of you that have questions and want lunch.
Even more importantly, my contact, thank you, my contact information and my Mexican cell phone number is on this form. And I'm happy to talk to I'm happy to listen to anybody. You're my teachers. All of my teachers are dead now. And I'm not all, because I'm learning for a lot. I'm in nursing homes all the time visiting people I love. And my cousin Anthony is teaching me tremendous things, and I'm making decisions about my own life based on that. Yes?
Okay, last question.
Is my Canadian living will valid in Mexico?
No.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Loretta.